Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We are a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're going to finish our series on the Pathfinder Second Edition classes with the Wizard. Hey, before we get going into the Wizard, if you could do me a big favor and hit the subscribe button. Unless you've already subscribed, that is counterproductive to what we want to accomplish. Hopefully, us and you. But please do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And the like button. We appreciate both of those things. And yeah, thanks. So the Wizard is a prepared arcane spellcaster with quite a storied history throughout Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder. Yeah, let's jump right into it with the stats and progression. Wizards are squishy. They only get they get exactly 6 plus their Constitution modifier hit points per level. And their boosted ability score is Intelligence, which is important to them. For Perception, they begin trained, and that will go up to Expert at 11 and no higher, which is, they're always in their head somewhere. They're miles away thinking about some new arcane whatever. For saving throws, the Wizards are trained in Fortitude, and that will progress to Expert at level 9. They are also trained in Reflex, and that will progress to Expert at level 5. And they begin Expert with Will saves, and that will progress to Master at 17. So, not great saves, and a huge chunk of time where they're sort of set in stone, but, the Wizard's got enough spells to back that up, hopefully. For skills, the Wizard is always trained in Arcana, and will also be trained in 2 plus their Intelligence modifier additional skills. Doesn't seem like a lot, but Intelligence is their primary modifier, so they'll likely begin play with somewhere between 5 to 7, 6 or 7 skill points, or trained skills. So they'll be fine. For attacks, Wizards are trained in only a few weapons, actually, not even the full suite of simple weapons. They are trained in clubs, crossbows, heavy crossbows, daggers, and staves. And that's it. They will progress to Expert at level 11, and will pick up weapon specialization at 13. Suffice it to say, Gandalf is about the only Wizard you're going to see with a longsword and a staff, one in each hand. With that said, there's a lot of ways to build around it, but the default Wizard is not a martial character. Speaking of, for defenses, they begin trained, but only in unarmored defense, and that will progress to Expert at level 13, and that's as good as it gets. Like I said, squishy. But here's where the action is. For spells, the Wizard begins trained, will progress to Expert at 7, will progress past that to Master at 15, and Legendary at 19. And this applies to both attacks and DCs with the Arcane tradition. And, all spellcasters except War Priests right now get to Legendary spellcasting. So the Wizard isn't special there, but once we're about to jump into some of the things that sort of set the Wizard apart. So first of all, for class features, the Wizard gets an Arcane Bond. This, you get to select an item, a ring, a staff, a dagger, an amulet, whatever. It could be a weapon, as I said. And you get to imbue it with a little bit of your magical essence. And doing so allows you to use the action Drain Bonded Item, and that will allow you to recast a spell you've already cast from your prepared spells for the day, once per day. You will also select an Arcane School. You will gain an additional spell known and add it to your spell book. You'll also get an extra spell slot for each level that must be used to prepare a spell from your selected school. You gain a special focus spell called a school spell for your given school. Now, alternatively, you can be a Universalist Wizard who isn't focused on a single school and will gain a free first level Wizard feat and can use the Drain Bonded Item once per day for each spell level that they possess. So, low levels, that's going to be the same, one across the board, but Once you hit 3rd level, get access to 2nd level spells. Now you can do it twice as often as the other person, the other wizard. Not bad. So what are the schools? Well, there's Abjuration for defense and protection. There's Conjuration for summoning creatures and objects. Divination, which is viewing and prescience. Enchantment, to manipulate others' minds. Evocation, which is raw destructive power. Illusion, to create images, figments, and phantasms. That's a fun phrase right from the core book. Necromancy, power over life and death. And Transmutation, to physically alter creatures, objects, the environment, just the world around you. As mentioned, you do use a spell book to prepare your spells. You'll start with a spell book that has 10 cantrips and 5 first level arcane spells. And you'll add 2 more spells known every single time you gain a level. Or you can add new spells from scrolls or spell books that you find, or any other way that your GM may provide them to you, but with the Learn a Spell downtime activity. Finally, you will also choose an Arcane Thesis. Wizards all get their power not from their blood, like a sorcerer, or pulling from nature, like a druid, or from a god, like a cleric. They all were just sheer personality, like a bard. No, wizards get it by, they're like scientists. They learn the secret rules that make the whole world tick, and then they learn how to manipulate those rules. So it's assumed that all wizards have studied. It does not mean that your wizard has to have gone to a formal school. You don't have to be from Hogwarts. You can still be some sort of wizard that, lives out in a hut by him or herself and, just studies on your own, whatever, but you're still going to have some sort of a thesis, something that is, your core belief about a crux of magic and how it works. So your options are improved familiar attunement. This is going to give you a familiar that's a bit more powerful than familiars that other wizards or other spellcasters can get their hands on, except the witch. You should watch the witch video. They are probably very much the best with familiars, as they should be. It's kind of their whole thing. But an improved familiar attunement wizard is still really good and does still get some tricks that the witch does not get access to. Additionally, this familiar, one of these tricks that we're talking about, your familiar will become your bonded item. So you can drain your familiar instead of an item to cast a spell again. And that is across anything that mentions or relies on a bonded item, your familiar counts as yours for all purposes. The next thesis available to you is the Metamagic Experimentation. You'll gain a free first level Metamagic feat, and beginning at 4th level, you can choose another as part of your daily preparations up to half your level that you can swap out every day that you make those preparations. So, it'll start out as a 2nd level feat, but, once you reach 10th level, that's a bad example, but once you reach 12th level, it can be up to 6th level, and so on. So having that metamagic feat that you can swap out daily is pretty cool, and really ties into one of the big strengths of the class. There's also spell blending, where you very much theorize on combining spells, and it allows you to trade 2 lower level spell slots for a single spell slot up to 2 levels higher. You can trade as many as you'd like, so you could just go all day. You don't have any 3rd level spells today, but you got a couple extra 4th level spells, just as an example. That's actually pretty strong, considering that a big limiter in spellcasters' power in 2nd edition is being able to is limiting how many high-level spells that a wizard can push out, or a spellcaster in general can push out in a given day. The next possibility is spell substitution. This is really a huge thing for wizards. People who have played in other editions, this will sound really great to you, and it is. It allows you to take a 10-minute downtime activity to swap out an unused prepared spell with another from your spell book. It's got to be something that could go in that spell slot, of course. It's got to fit those. It has to have been something that you could have put in that spell slot as part of your daily preparations that morning. But now you've seen what kind of dangers you're facing, exactly how you have a better idea of how your day is going, so you can swap out a spell. You can do this an unlimited number of times, as long as you have remaining spell slots and 10 minutes. If you fail, if something interrupts that 10 minutes, then you don't lose the spell slot. It stays the spell that it was. but you will have to begin the whole 10-minute activity again if you still want to change it after that interruption. Finally, the Staff Nexus. This one was added in the APG. It's a little bit different, but still pretty cool. So you start with a makeshift staff, which is normally a fairly high, at least in terms of, we won't get it until 4th-ish level typically. But you get to start with a makeshift staff. It gains no charges normally. Full staff rules, we won't go into them here. We probably will have to do another video on how staves and wands work. But suffice to say, you normally get a set number of free charges, and then you can, as a prepared caster, you can expend some spell slots to, or a spell slot to gain more charges. We may have actually covered this in our spellcasting basics video. I'm not sure. I think maybe we did. So, as I said, this one doesn't begin with any charges. It only gets the charges that you spend to give it. And it only begins with a cantrip and a first level spell, but you can upgrade it to go into another staff that you do get. You can, transfer your makeshift staff into that staff, adding the spell that you got and the cantrip, so expanding that one's capabilities. And this, as a regular staff, will now get the default charges per day in addition to the ones you get. Finally, in addition, at 8th level, you can expend 2 spells each day to add charges to the staff. Staffs are really, really useful for spellcasters of all sorts in Pathfinder 2nd Edition because it really opens up your versatility day to day if you have a staff that has a bunch of spells you assume you're going to want to use. And having this pseudo-customizable staff is primo. So now that's the basics of the progression. Let's jump into Feats and Builds and talk about, what kind of options you'll see as a wizard. As usual, we're not going to talk specific builds or anything. We're not going to, hit too hard on actual specific feats just to save time. We're just going to sort of throw out a smattering of the kind of things you might see. You get a wide slew of metamagic feats, which is really key for the wizard. That's sort of their edge, sort of. They have a lot of metamagic feats that others don't, and most spellcasters get a few, but wizards seem to have a few really neat ones that can't be found anywhere else. So, you're going to get the basics. You're going to get silent spell, still spell, reach spell, widen spell, all that stuff. And quicken spell, of course. It's big. It's great. But there's also overwhelming energy, which I think you share with the druid. But then there are some unique ones like gaining resistance based on the last spell you cast, or imparting a weakness on an enemy that you just hit with a spell. You can also conjure your bonded item, which includes a familiar if you've gone for the enhanced familiar attunement, or improved familiar attunement. So that's pretty fun. Up to a mile away, it's there for you, which is really great if it's in danger, or if your familiar is in danger, it's out doing some sort of scouting type of thing. And it's also great for your weapon if you've been disarmed, getting your staff back. Worst case scenario, you can give it to the fighter and maybe they've got a weapon to fight with them. But you'll also be able to gain an additional focus spell for your school. You'll be able to pick up a familiar if you didn't go that route with your thesis and improve it to be comparable to the thesis version of the familiar. You can get changing variations of a spell after you cast it. That's a fun feat. Any sort of decisions you make when you cast a spell, you can reduce its duration to change them. There are options to hack the drain bonded item or familiar class feature so that you can get this sort of cascading thing and end up with several recast spells per day. Or dozens if you're a Universalist. And this is good because I don't think I mentioned it, but the Universalist does not get any bonus spells. I didn't specifically state that, so definitely a great recommended path to make up for those free spell slots per day that you're missing out on. I mean, you have the recast slots normally, drain bonded item for each spell level, but with these hacks to get additional ones, you can get a whole lot of mileage out of your spell slots as a Universalist wizard. Or any wizard who picks it up, but especially a Universalist wizard. Counterspell is huge for wizards. Most spellcasters get access to it, but wizards are arguably the best at it once they get clever counterspell. At that point, you can get pretty flexible with the spells you can use to counterspell, and you can counterspell a spell just by it being in your spell book. You don't have them prepared that day. I would say they're most likely the best counterspellers in Second Edition. You also get a lot of great options to penetrate the magical defense. One specifically is to a lot of monsters will have +1 to saves versus magic, and there's a feat specifically to negate that. So that's fun. And then, by 20th level, you're going to get things like combining 2 spells into 1 spell, sort of like the spell blending, but you're actually combining the spells into a single spell. So in terms of action economy and output, that's pretty fun. There's going to be an option to select 4 spells of different levels up to 9th that you always have prepared with their own spell slots. So there's a lot of tools like that for wizards. You already have more spell slots than most other casters. I think only sorcerer has 4 as well. But you also have a lot of tools to recast, to potentially add additional spell slots, which is very rare in Pathfinder Second Edition. So don't sleep on that. So what do I think of the wizard? I like the wizard. Wizard was one of my favorite classes in previous editions of D&D and Pathfinder. I'm a big fan. I like the class fantasy of it. Like everyone can use magic, but I'm the master of magic. I'm bending it to my will. They're tapping into it various ways. I'm just commanding it to work. And there's something really cool about that. The wizard is a very competent, prepared spellcaster that has a lot of potential and can do things with spells for sure that other classes just can't, which does illustrate that mastery of spellcasting as an art or science. However, what they have in versatility, they sort of lack in oomph. What I mean by that is there's nothing that a wizard can do that in a fight that will really turn heads. There's no big spectacular wow moment besides quicken spell, which a lot of spellcasters can do. But there's nothing unique. Bards have their bardic music, druids have wild shape, clerics have healing or harmful font. The sorcerer has some pretty wacky out there bloodline abilities, including the little riders they get on some of their spells that they cast. Witches have their boons and their extra special familiar, and oracles have all the fun shenanigans with their curses. Wizards don't really have anything like that. That's certainly, I think, intended. That's not to say that they don't have as many tools. I would argue that they have as many tools or more than most spellcasters. There's just nothing that dramatic, and that's probably by design. I mean, wizards should be a little more subtle. There is sort of this fun play element where you don't appreciate how good some of these wizard abilities are until you've been playing long enough and you've seen the limitations that other people have to deal with spellcasters, and then you see how the wizard gets around it. So it's sort of like this weird sort of meta-knowledge thing where, the more you know about spellcasting, the more impressive the wizard looks. And that can be in game as well, where, while you're not doing the big flashy stuff that a druid might be able to do, people who know what they can't do, seeing you do these little things that the fighter may not notice, the other spellcasters in the party probably are. And they may be a lot more jealous, whereas the marshals in the party might be more jealous of the big dramatic things. So wizards are subtle, and that's kind of cool and that's kind of fun. I would probably like to see a little more flavor options. I'm reminded of the previous versions of the way that school spells worked, where you would take you would have more difficulty casting spells from 1 or 2 other schools to get some sort of an advantage in casting a singular school. I understand why they didn't do that. Saves are tough enough, but they're also in a place where giving any sort of boost to them could really offset things in dramatic ways. So I get why they didn't. With that said, it's a really good class. If you want flashy, that's what those other classes are for. If you want to be very proficient and have a whole lot of spells per day and a whole lot more versatility than anybody else with how you use those spells and which of your many spells you can get access to, then the wizard's probably the way for you. So that's it. That's our video on the wizard, and more importantly, that is the end of our class videos. We're not sure exactly what we're going to be doing in place of these. We do like having something that week to week, even if we're not, even if we don't have anything, to get hype about, like the hype video for 2021 books coming out, or anything that we're thinking about that we want to talk about. We like having something set that we know, like, oh, we've got to get through these, so we can always do one of those videos. So we like having that. We're just not sure exactly what we're going to replace it with yet. It could be another series, but we might wait to do a long series. I do want to talk a lot about ancestors, which is something we haven't really had a chance to discuss yet. Probably not as in-depth. They won't each be getting a video like this. But I do intend to do the kineticist third-party class, just because one of my players is really curious about it, was interested in it in the first edition version, which was a Paizo first-party class. And then when we switched over, they sort of have always been just sort of glancing over their shoulder back at kineticist, wondering when we're going to see that. And there's a pretty well-regarded third-party version of it. So we're going to check that out. We're probably going to do a video on it just like we did this wizard one. It will be a little different because they future-proofed that one by giving it like 1 million feats. So, because they knew that they wouldn't be publishing a whole, they wouldn't be regularly publishing more source material to add to it like Paizo is. So they just sort of dumped it all out in one go. So it will probably be a little bit different, but we do intend to do the kineticist. If there's any other series or anything like that you can think of, definitely let us know down in the comments. Really helps us know what you guys want to see. And if you have a wizard, tell me about your subtle, tricksy, manipulative, magical ways down in the comments. I always like to hear about people's wizards. Again, it's kind of one of my favorite classes. And there's a lot of room for weirdness in a wizard. Thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate you hanging out, and we'll see you next time. Welcome to the Collective.